Welcome to the Be Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Hey, before I go into my usual intro here, I want to let you know that at the end of this episode, I'm featuring a question from a listener, just like you. She called in to 877-280-5170, and she left a message with a travel-related question that I go on to answer. I'd like to make this a regular thing because I do get a lot of questions from readers of my websites and my books and from listeners, and I think this is a great way to hear directly from you and be able to answer in a way that all listeners can hear. So hang in there for that. I do appreciate you joining me today for another episode of the Be Bold podcast. And as you hopefully know by now, this is where I feature conversations with women who have inspirational stories to share. Despite a wide array of backgrounds and paths, what these women have in common is that they are following their gut. They're doing what they love, and they aren't waiting for someone else to tell them it's okay or that this or that way is the quote-unquote right way to live. They're just doing it. Quite simply, they are being bold. We all know deep down what it is we should be doing with our lives. And I'll admit that sometimes it truly is circumstances that are preventing us from doing something. But I'm going to bet that more often than not, it's the story we're telling ourselves. It's just a story. That's what's stopping us. We're filled with reasons why we can't do something, and that's what's preventing us from moving forward to pursuing our dreams. Now, I hope today's conversation will provide you with a little inspiration in terms of how you might live a better, more fulfilling life. Today, I'm chatting with Kim Steutermann Rogers. Kim is a journalist and photographer living on Kauai. And I gotta tell you, she has carved out a beautiful life for herself on the island, not only because she's making a living doing something that's very difficult these days to make a living at, and that specifically being a journalist and photographer, but she also calls herself a citizen scientist. Now, how she describes it is that she's managed to draw upon her early love for science, and she's coupled that with her journalistic talents. What she's created is this life that has provided her with experiences and opportunities she could never have imagined. There really is so much subtle beauty in this conversation pertaining to this lifestyle that she's chosen. And it all started when she left her family and friends behind on the mainland and just picked up and moved with her husband to this little slice of heaven. Now, I don't expect everyone to just pick up and move to an island after hearing this, but I hope you'll dig deep and really think about what it is that makes you happy. Think about the different pieces of your life that you enjoy the most and consider how you might put them all together. You know, it actually reminds me of my conversation with Sarah McGardle on episode number 59. Sarah's a career change agent and life coach who helps women uncover what their talents and interests are for the very purpose of creating a lifestyle that's more suitable to what it is they love, just bringing together all of those elements. So kudos to Kim for following her heart and finding that combination on her own. Before we get started with that conversation, I want to mention that I'm working on a Patreon page where you'll be able to support what I'm doing through a small donation. Now, those funds will help pay for my fabulous audio editor as well as travel to some cities where I have guests lined up, but I just haven't made it to their city yet to record. Now, that Patreon contribution is also going to unlock additional content that includes questions I ask my guests after we've wrapped up the main part of the conversation. And you'll hear me allude to that at the end of this episode with Kim. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on where that conversation was going at the end there. I also want to mention that this month, October, I'm running a giveaway of a Cozy Up jacket from Prana. One winner will be chosen from my newsletter subscribers on the Wanderlust and Lipstick site, and that's WANDER, Wanderlust and Lipstick. So if you're not already a subscriber, just go to the website wanderlustandlipstick.com and just sign up. You'll also see on the homepage a link to a post about other ways that you can enter. I think there's probably 4 ways in total, and that ups your chances. Okay, with that, please enjoy this conversation with Kim Steutermann Rogers. You live in a not only a beautiful home here that's filled with amazing photography, by the way, but you've got a beautiful view here as well. And thank you. You've positioned it so that I have the view, and I really appreciate that because it's really pretty cool.
Absolutely.
How long have you been here in the house?
Well, we moved in before it was completed, so we sort of built the house around us. So it depends on when we actually moved in, and we've never really quite finished it. But I would say about 15 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And we definitely situated it for the view.
And it's beautiful. And is this a mountain range that has a name?
This is a mountain range. This is Kauai.
Okay.
And often people look at it, as they do elsewhere in Hawaii, and see different images, if you will, cut out in the shapes of the mountain and or the rocks. So some people might see on the far left that point as a turtle, a profile of a turtle. The next point, some people will refer to it as either a shark's fin or King Kong. So
I see the shark's fin.
Mm-hmm. Right. And if you look at the entire ridge, some people I've heard refer to it as a reclining or a sleeping pregnant goddess.
Mm-hmm. I see that. Oh, that's what I see. Yeah.
And living here, depending on what the sun is doing, the clouds are doing, the rain is doing, you can sit out on the lanai.
Because you get that in 10 minutes. You get the sun, rain, and clouds.
And you get that all in 10 minutes. And so it's like a piece of artwork that's constantly changing.
Yeah. And the coconut tree.
And the coconut
tree.
Right
there as well.
And usually we use the coconuts when we have a hurricane warning. It's like if it's really bad, the coconuts are falling off. But if they're still hanging on, we're usually pretty safe. So those are kind of our gauge.
This is just beautiful. You've got,
you
literally have a slice of heaven here.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So thanks for chatting with me today. It's really funny. I'll give listeners a little bit of background. I'm on the island of Kauai. And I had reached out to a friend of mine and I said, hey, and she does PR work for Maui. And I said, hey, I've got my podcasting equipment here on island and I'm looking for some women to talk to for the podcast. Do you have any recommendations? And she said, okay, let me check into it a little bit. And then she got back to me and she said, I don't know her personally, but 2 people recommended Kim Rogers. You have to go talk to her. And I was like, okay. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, I think I know her. And you reminded me that we probably met at a couple of conferences over the years, and that was many years ago. I mean, 5-7 years doesn't seem like, in theory, that doesn't seem like a long time ago, but it seems like forever. It just seems like it does seem like a long time ago. So we've had some communication or some meeting at some point. So it's nice to see you again
as well. Good to see you.
And I really look forward to hearing about what it is that you're doing here. And, I said, I want to know what you're doing. Why these people are pointing me toward you? And you said, yeah, me too. I don't know.
I don't know. Wow.
But I know. But you know what? After hearing what you're involved in, I think it's a really important story to tell. If, about you, for one thing, because there's definitely some inspiration in there. But I think beyond that, really the work that you're doing is really interesting, and we'll get to that. So tell me and tell listeners what it is actually that you're doing that is so interesting at the moment.
Well, I find it interesting. And simply, I'm a freelance journalist and a photographer. So I happen to have blended 2 of my kind of lifelong curiosities and interests, one being writing. I went to journalism school. I have a Bachelor of Journalism. And the second one being science. Throughout high school and college, I took a lot of science classes, but I veered away from science and went into journalism. And moving here to Hawaii almost 20 years ago, over time, I woke up one day and I was like, wow, I've sort of blended those 2 passions that I've had all my life, because I write a lot about the science of endangered and native flora and fauna here in Hawaii. And so I chase scientists around and ask them a lot of questions, call them up, email them, and write about it for online publications, print publications, both local as well as national.
How did you find that niche?
I don't know. It just happened. I think the way I live my life tends to be that I follow my curiosities. And so one curiosity led to another. When we moved here almost 20 years ago, It was because I had sold a business on the mainland and decided I wanted to really get into writing instead of talking about it or representing it. And so when we moved here, it was kind of a little bit before the internet, the big internet, and certainly just as email was starting to take off. And I said, if supposedly a person could write anywhere in the world, I might as well put that to the test on an island.
I might as well go to paradise.
Right. And so the internet and email made it a lot easier to do that.
Isn't it amazing?
Mm-hmm.
Because I would not have the business that I have today if it hadn't been for the internet.
Absolutely.
just it's given so many people power and just the ability to create businesses.
Absolutely.
There's no excuse.
Right.
There's absolutely no excuse. Well, where'd you live on the mainland?
The Midwest. So I like to say that I was born in Dallas. Lived there 6 weeks. My parents up and moved to a suburb of Chicago, which is truly where I was raised and graduated from college. And then when I went to college, I went to the University of Missouri School of Journalism, purposefully to go there. I happened to have a lot of family in the immediate area, so it felt like home. And then I met my husband on spring break in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, God.
One of those stories.
Yeah, but it's lasted.
It's stuck. Yeah, go figure. So when I graduated from Mizzou, University of Missouri, I moved to the Kansas City area, and my husband was living in the Lawrence, Kansas area. So just, about 45 minutes away. And when we did get married, we came to Kauai on our honeymoon, and we bought timeshare. And so that is what kept drawing us back again and again, owning a timeshare condominium on the North Shore of Kauai. And after doing that a half a dozen times.
So over 6 years,
No, over 11 years.
Okay. So every other year or so.
Ish, yeah. Mm-hmm. After doing it that amount of time, we kept threatening to move and then finally did when I was 36 and he was 37. And we told family and friends it was for 1 year. It'll be 19 years this December.
Did they know when you left that it would be for more than a year?
No, we told family and friends we were leaving for 1 year.
I'm just wondering if they looked at you and said, oh yeah, right, you're going to be back.
I'm sure some people looked at me and said, there's no way you're coming back. But I think like my immediate family, my parents, his parents probably thought we would and hoped we would
go back.
Yeah.
I think
it's far. It's far.
It is far. Mm-hmm. But who doesn't want to go? Who doesn't want to have friends in Hawaii?
Right.
To go visit it. So why not? It's often easier to leave on a big trip or a big adventure or take a big leap if you even tell yourself that it's a shorter event, because then it doesn't seem so daunting. But if you had set out and said, we're picking up and we're not coming back and we're just moving everything. So probably just telling yourself that story probably helped.
Absolutely. Most definitely. And I do think when we moved, I definitely couldn't see us being here for as long as we have. But Kauai, there's a saying on the island, Kauai either welcomes you with open arms or spits you out. And I certainly have seen numerous people, friends who've come thinking, this is it. I'm going to retire. I've dreamed of living here and maybe last 6 months and leave.
What happens to those people? Like what is it that spits them out?
I've seen two things. Yeah, no, I've seen two things. One is health, that they have a health problem and they can get better health care, or so they think perhaps, on the mainland, or be surrounded by family.
Okay.
Right? If they have a health issue.
That makes sense.
And the second big one, especially at the age that I am right now, is grandchildren. Those grandbabies pull people back like a boomerang.
Mm-hmm. So the people that you're talking about are in their mid-50s or so.
I'd say 40s to 50s to 60s.
They're not 20-somethings thinking that they're going to come here and then they go, oh gosh, this just isn't for me. Because I can see how you can get island fever and just say, because it's expensive to leave.
It's expensive and it depends on what your interest levels are. From a cultural standpoint, there's a lot of Hawaiian culture here. But if to you culture is the opera.
Theater.
Broadway and
music,
theater and music, or even fine dining. Your options get limited here quickly.
Yeah. So part of the really fascinating thing that I think you're doing is as you said, that you've been able to bring together kind of the journalist aspect
Mm-hmm.
and the science aspect of things, you've married those together, and you're doing a lot of conservation work that kind of brings that together. So talk about that.
Yeah, I do. And this kind of led me to my writing path, if you will, that I was speaking about, how did I get to writing about science? So when I first moved here, one thing that became really apparent very quickly is that this is a place where people do a lot of giving and sharing of their money as well as their time, especially their time. There's lots of nonprofits here. There's many ways to volunteer for things. And so I was, I think at the time, volunteering at Kilauea Point National Wildlife Refuge, as well as volunteering for the Hawaiian monk seal conservation hui, when a friend asked me, I had just gotten a new dog from the Humane Society, adopted a 1-year-old hound mix, and of course, I thought she was brilliant. And a friend who was on the Kauai search and rescue team invited me to come out to their training. And so, of course, then I got my dog into search and rescue. But all of this started kind of, the snowballing, right? Where I'm doing all these things that are in conservation and volunteering for them. And oftentimes the conservation efforts would be for seabirds or for marine animals. And it very quickly became apparent to me that those topics I could easily write about. And so those then just became the stories that I would pitch to editors on the mainland. And, I'd have a foundation of expertise. I didn't have to do a whole lot of research into, say, monk seal to write about them, because I've spent countless hours pup sitting when a monk seal has a baby on the beach. We have a volunteer network, and we go out and just, sit from a fair distance from the mom and the pup, talk to people who might come up, educate them about this rare occurrence and, a little bit about the species, their natural history, and why we're trying to conserve them and why we go to these great efforts to save them, because there's only 1,400 left of them in the world. They're native to Hawaii, found here nowhere else in the world, that kind of stuff.
They're endangered?
They are endangered.
And you had mentioned a statistic to me earlier when we first started chatting offline about the number of endangered species here that just floored me.
Yeah. So in Hawaii is known as the endangered species capital of the world. And that's a moniker that we're not necessarily proud of, right?
Which is why it's not your tagline.
Right.
It's
exactly.
not on your license plate.
For Hawaii Visitors Bureau, right? Yeah. But the reason that exists is because we are so isolated out here in the middle of the ocean that when species got here before humans got here about 1,000 years ago, human arrival is pegged anywhere from 900 to 1,500 years ago. When the humans first arrived here, there were thousands of species here. This place was just filled with a lot of birds. And the things that got here that were then considered native they got here in one of three ways: on wing, water, and wind. So if it was a plant, it may have been a spore that blew here in the wind, got caught up maybe even in a hurricane and dropped here. It could have been a seed that was on in the feather, tucked into the feathers of a bird, right? And it was in its droppings and got its start that way. Or it swam here like monk seals, or they flew here like the birds. So there were lots of birds. And then when humans arrived, we started. Over time, there were extinctions, and with the advent or the arrival of Westerners, with Captain Cook in 1778 and subsequent, we've had a lot more extinctions. So we have unique species because over the years, these species that got here, this is evolution, right? They adapted to their new place because likely their predator or their prey didn't follow them. And so it was a safe place for them. And they would lose thorns if they were a plant. They would lose a chemical that was a poison elsewhere, so we have, it's just interesting. So in other words, new species to science, endemic, right? And so endangered species capital of the world now, because as more and more people come in and more introduced species, all of these original native species are threatened.
Is there an organization that is trying to prevent the extinction for Hawaii in general, but then for each of these species?
Yeah, there's lots of organizations. And back to what I mentioned, there's lots of nonprofits here. And I wouldn't say there's Fish and Wildlife Service. Of course, they are the overall umbrella who are to, help prevent extinctions. But there's only so much money. So the focus can only go on certain ones, or budgets are only given to certain species, be them flora or fauna. That allows the entrance of lots of individual organizations, be them federal, state, and even NGOs. So, for example, NOAA is responsible for the Hawaiian monk seal.
And NOAA is the National Organization of NOAA.
Correct.
Right. And I'll link to it in the show notes.
National Oceanic Atmospheric Association. So they oversee the recovery of the Hawaiian monk seal as well as the humpback whale.
Yeah. So you had mentioned earlier, because I think this is a good time to explore this a little bit, you said people here are very giving of their time.
Right.
And so naturally, what you're referring to is that there are people who are doing volunteer work, helping with these organizations. Right. What do you think makes this area and the island or the state or islands that people do have this generosity? Is it a matter of time? Is it the laid back feeling of being on an island? Is it the feeling of community? Is it kind of a combination of those?
I'm sure it's all of those things. However, I do believe that it started with the original culture that's here. The Hawaiian community is a very open and welcoming and loving community. And, they sort of are exemplars in this opening, generous, and giving of their time, So they may work a 40-hour-a-week job. Many people do. And then in their off time, so to speak, they're either belong to a hula halau, they might play music at resorts, at restaurants. You might see them on the beach, and there's a gathering of people with their ukuleles and, kanikapila style, which is in the carports and backyards, just people get together and play music. And or, the family taro patch, which is now being rejuvenated, if you will. Or there's Hawaiian heiau or fish ponds, cultural places that are being restored. So there's, there was a Hawaiian cultural renaissance that started in the 1970s, and it continues to this day.
Do you think that part of what spits a person out, like a person who comes here and doesn't kind of quote unquote make it, do you think part of it is that they bring their, I'm sorry to pick on, the East Coast, but do you think they bring their New York or their New Jersey or their California with them and can't really appreciate the island life? And maybe they are working 60 hours a week and they don't understand why not everybody else is?
Yeah, I'm sure. I do think there's a little bit of that. I think this place is so far removed geographically, but I think in that same sense, from a lifestyle, it's a different lifestyle. It doesn't fit everybody, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'm just surprised that that's not the first thing that you went to, because I would think, maybe it's just me being originally from New Jersey, because one of the things I think I would have the most difficult time with in coming here is that I'm not on island time, and I would expect everything else to move just a little bit faster or maybe on time than what might happen here.
Sure,
and so, but
sure.
that's not kind of the first thing that you went to.
No, I think there's that adjustment. We all have that adjustment. When I go to the mainland now and I get on a highway and I'm driving and I have to drive faster than 50 miles an hour and there's 4 lanes, I'm like a little freaking out myself, right? So there's an adjustment for me going that way. Mm-hmm. I think people who are attracted to this place have probably been on vacation here a few times or visited, and there is a connection. They feel something. So perhaps those, they're not going to come back if they don't feel the connection.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember driving around with the folks from the Hawaii tourism folks at one time, and they said, "Oh gosh, no! Like, you do not beep your horn here. Like that, that culturally you do not do that.
We don't beep horns.
Yeah. And I just think coming like in Seattle, we do more than we used to, but coming
Right.
from New Jersey, I'm like, that's how you get around. You
Right.
know? And especially I traveled to India where you have to honk your horn, just to,
and that is part of the culture.
just to wake everybody up. But yeah, anyway, that was a cute little thing that I just remembered of like, no, you don't honk your horn. What are you doing?
The other
That's
one,
crazy.
it's funny that you bring that up because the other one I remember is we had some friends visiting and we rode in the car with them. And we were heading to the North Shore or something. And my husband and I were in the back seat and we kept like grabbing each other because my girlfriend who was driving was, in our opinion, tailgating. And at one point she noticed our reaction and she said, am I making you nervous with the driving? And we're like, yes, you're tailgating. And so,
there's 2 car lengths. And,
right. She's like, I got plenty of time. And we're like, so it's just, it's what you get used to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. So you're doing a lot of this work, kind of the volunteer work that you do, and then you're also really getting the word out about the endangered species. And you do a lot of work with the albatross. Is that right?
Do.
You know what? I think this is like so embarrassing, but I think that before chatting with you earlier, it wasn't even on my radar that there were albatross here. What you hear about are those damn roosters out there.
Oh yeah, we got those.
They're all over the place, and everybody.
I've heard a couple crowing while we've been chatting.
I've heard that too. I don't know if they're coming through on the microphone, so I hear those. But then the other thing are the Nenes, because you've got the Nene crossing, so you have so many signs around there. But tell me about the albatross, because that, like I said, that just was not on my radar at all, but it's a big issue here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a growing population, let's put it that way. But let me back up to the Nene real quickly, because they're a great story. And so we talk about endangered species, and I didn't mention fully 1/3 or approximately 1/3 of the species on the endangered species list, the U.S. federal endangered species list, are found here in Hawaii. Now that's flora and fauna, plants and animals. The Nene is on that list. However, they're a great story of recovery because so the story goes, in the 1950s, we were down to approximately 30-some individual Nene.
No kidding.
And the Nene, for some of your listeners who may not know, is the Hawaiian goose. They're a descendant of the Canada goose. I think the fossil records put them in Hawaii for about 500,000 years. So over time, their body size has gotten smaller, again, as they've adapted to this new environment. The webbing between their feet has gotten less. They don't spend as much time on the water, and they think perhaps that creation of more like fingers for feet versus webbed toes is to help them get around on the black lava rocks, the sharp lava rocks. They also don't migrate. As of, I think, this past summer, the latest estimate that I heard on their population is about 3,000. And that's across the state. We now see them on Hawaii Island, Maui, Big Island, I mentioned that one, and Kauai. Very rarely on Oahu, very rarely on Molokai. But so they're a great comeback story. So much so that at least on the island of Kauai, they're considering downlisting them. So reducing some of the protections for them. So that's the Nene story. That's a great, for Hawaii, it's one of our great recovery stories.
Well, it reminds me of the eagle too.
Yeah, or the condor, the California condor.
Oh gosh. Well, see, that I'm not familiar with, but I just remember growing up and the big story was the eagle and protecting the eagles. And I go, like in my neighborhood of West Seattle, I go down to the beach. And I mean, I've seen eagles from my deck at my house, but they're much more common down on Alki Beach. Right. I can go for a run down there and I see them, darting into the water.
Keep your eyes peeled really well and maybe have some good binoculars with you. You might spy a black-footed albatross offshore. So albatross, we'll segue into that now.
Would that even be down in Poipu?
You might see them flying offshore, but they're seabirds. So Nene are water birds, right? So they're terrestrial.
Or street birds, as the
right.
as the crossings would have you believe.
Right. But albatross are seabirds. So albatross and other seabirds that we have here on Kauai, red-footed boobies, wedge-tailed shearwater. These are all seabirds, great frigate birds. They all make their living at the sea, right? Albatross probably spend 98 to 90% of their entire life at sea. which means they're flying most of the time, right? They obviously have to land to get some food. But back in the day, pre-human arrival here that I mentioned, these islands were giant seabird sanctuaries. There would have been birds in the ground burrowing with nests, birds nesting on the ground, birds nesting in bushes, birds nesting in the tops of trees, right? So there were birds everywhere. It would have been, and the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, the remote islands that extend beyond Kauai, the island chain of Hawaii continues on for another 1,000 miles. And that's a protected area known as Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument. Those islands, or most of those are atolls, look like what our islands used to look like pre-human arrival.
Just filled with birds.
Birds everywhere. Birds in the air, birds on the ground, birds underground. And the smell that would have come with that, right? The smell of guano. So albatross are seabirds. We have on this island and on Oahu, Laysan albatross that nest here. They arrive sometime in November for their breeding season, and they lay their eggs in January, early February, and their chicks do not fledge, which means start flying, until June, July. And when those chicks do fledge, they go out to sea and they do not touch land again for 3 to 5 years.
What?
Yeah. So these are long flying endurance athletes is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Laysan albatross have a 6.5-foot wingspan. So that's taller than I am, right?
And you're tall.
And I'm tall. Yeah. And so they're
landing in the water.
They will land on the water because that's where they forage.
Yeah.
But they have this amazing ability in the air to lock their shoulder joint and elbow joint and glide, and they shut off half their brain, rest half their brain, and that's their form of rest or sleeping, what you and I might call sleeping. They're on autopilot, literally, in the air. So they what's called rest on the wing. And then when they land on the water, it's just to forage. When they land back here on land,
3 to 5 years later,
as chicks, when they come back for the first time, 3 to 5 years, they might spend another 3 to 5 years looking for a mate.
Well, I was going to say, when they come back after that, when they come back after the 3 to 5 years, what brings them back?
That's the only reason, to mate.
To mate, okay.
So if they could figure out how to float an egg on the ocean and raise a chick on the ocean, they would. But they haven't figured that out, although they're pretty darn smart, because when they feed this chick that's on this little, their nests are these big nest cups, maybe 2 to 3 feet in diameter. When they leave to go get food for their chick, they go out on multi-day foraging events, and they will fly nearly to the Aleutian chain off of Alaska to get food, because that's where the abundance in those cold water, that's where the abundance of squid can be found. They will make sometimes 2 to 3 week foraging trips before they come back and feed that chick. And here's the cool thing. When they come back to feed that chick, they can, like I call it, they drop their webbed feet and will land 2, 3 to 10 feet away from their chick. That's how spot on their internal GPS is. We have this external machine called the GPS. They have it built into their brain.
So, but what do they? So they're foraging for 2 to 3 weeks, and then they come back with the food.
Right.
Where's the food? It's not in their shopping bag.
It's in their shopping bag that they've swallowed.
So, and then they come back and they regurgitate.
They regurgitate the food.
So they're able to suppress their digestion.
The digestion works in a twofold manner, to where they take in the nutrients that they need for themselves, and then they have like a storage spot, a pantry, if you will. And that's where from which they regurgitate for the chick. And the chick, depending on its age, at first I call it the golden nectar. It's like a squid smoothie that they regurgitate. And then as the chick gets older, some chunks of fish and or squid are coming up, because the chick is now older and able to digest it. And the thing is, it takes the work of 2 parents to raise one chick.
Because one's staying with it, or because they're both out foraging?
Up until the chick's about 2 to 3 weeks of age, there's typically an adult with it the entire time. And then they will both leave, and they take turns coming back. And if the parents have got their shifts scheduled just right, the chick may be left alone for a week, no more than 2 weeks. But sometimes...
Are they communicating?
We don't know, right? I would love to know the answer to that question. Yeah.
But that's researchers are trying to figure that out, I'm sure.
Right.
I did not expect this conversation.
Sorry.
but this is so fascinating because I have so many questions about it. But that's what I'm just saying, like, this is so interesting to me. So I have weird questions about it because I know nothing.
Yeah.
So when you say that they come back and initially it's like that golden nectar, are they in their same pantry? Do they also have those chunks? Not to be totally gross, because it reminds me of my college days, unfortunately. But do they also have those chunks, or do those chunks come the next time they go out and forage? And it's just, so at first they're giving them digestible baby food, and then the next time they go out and forage, then the digestion is a little bit different, and then it's more it's
solids.
It's more
They've
solids.
moved to solids.
Okay,
that's it exactly.
Okay. It's not on that one foraging trip that they're able to produce different things.
Right.
That is totally wild.
They're pretty amazing birds and animals. And
are there other birds that you know of that do anything similar to that? Or
most seabirds do, absolutely.
Okay.
But they're all a little different timing. So wedge-tailed shearwaters, red-footed boobies, their foraging trips are much shorter, maybe a day, maybe 2 or 3 days. Hawaiian petrels, from what I understand, go a little bit further and will spend more time away. So it all depends on the species. And my thinking on that is, we all have to find our niche in life on how to survive. And that's what we see here, is we have seen, these animals, all birds, but their life history can be very different. Now, the cool thing about Laysan albatross is that the only place in the world that they are nesting, and I believe that the only place that any albatross is nesting among people is here on Kauai and Oahu to an extent. They're nesting on Oahu, but in some really more remote areas. Here on Kauai, we have Laysan albatross nesting all across the North Shore. Yes, there's a refuge there called Kilauea Point National Wildlife Refuge, and that's where the colony first got started, back here when they were kind of repatriating, if you will, the main Hawaiian islands. But they nest in people's backyards. They nest on golf courses.
So that when you say it's a refuge, it's more like a protected area, but it's not a place that I could go visit.
Actually, you can visit Kilauea Point National Wildlife Refuge. So that is part of the Fish and Wildlife Service National Wildlife Refuge system across the country. There's hundreds of them. We have 3 National Wildlife Refuges on Kauai. Kilauea Point happens to be the one where the Laysan albatross are nesting. You will see them in the good months of, say, January, February, March. You'll see them flying overhead. They happen to nest, though, on a part of the refuge that's closed to the public. And that is because they nest on the ground, that, for their protection. The refuge exists first and foremost to protect the animals there.
When you had your big storm here earlier this year, what happened with them?
Yeah, so in April we had what I've heard referred to as a rain bomb, where in the course of 24 hours we had close to 50 inches of rain drop in a very concentrated area too. There was flooding across the island, but extreme flooding on the North Shore, Princeville, Hanalei, Ha'ena, Limahuli, Ke'e, that whole end of the island. And it was toward the end of the albatross nesting season, so our chicks were older, which was good. And from what I know, we did not lose a single Laysan albatross chick that was attributed to the flooding, which was pretty amazing.
Yeah,
but I will also say albatross tend to nest in higher elevation areas. And that is why these islands, the main Hawaiian islands, I sort of referenced that they're kind of returning to them. So there is fossil evidence that Laysan albatross, among a bunch of other different seabirds, were here pre-human arrival, but they were extirpated. So because of humans and the things we bring with us and introduce, like, cats and mongoose and pigs and rats, a lot of these seabirds, which were basically, to use a bad pun, sitting ducks, they had no predators before humans arrived, no land-based predators. And so
you said that they nest high. Did that help them survive them?
That helped them survive during the flooding.
Okay.
Yes. Now that said, we did lose some birds, not too many seabirds that I know of at all, but water birds at Hanalei National Wildlife Refuge. So in a wetland area, right? Where the river flooded, just masses of water came tumbling down the cliffs and the valleys and just flooded the entire valley. There were some birds lost there. Not a huge numbers of adults because most of them could fly away, but what was definitely lost were nests and eggs and young
That makes
chicks.
sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And of course, I have to also acknowledge that during that horrible rain, all of our farmers in the valley, Hanalei Valley, taro farmers, lost either crops or it was just a sundry of things. You know, soil got moved around, sediment got moved around, some depending on the age and the maturation of the kalo or the taro, that was affected differently. And then structures and equipment lost due to all that flooding.
The pier, I heard the pier went out. Is that right? And some people lost their homes?
There was at least one home floating down the river.
Oh,
there were other homes that had just had so much structural damage, like to sinkholes or flooding, just flooding, then the subsequent mold that happens in a warm place like this. Farm animals, there were bison that got flooded and washed down the river and ended up like literally swimming in Hanalei Bay, standing on the reef.
Oh, jeez.
And those guys had to be corralled and brought back in. To this day, Blackpot Beach Park, which is in Hanalei, is closed because the river mouth it just blew out the river mouth and decided to find a new path. So it's just such a voluminous amount of water coming through that water is very strong. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Well, you certainly know your albatross.
I do know a fair amount about albatross.
And you've got beautiful photography.
I do photograph them. Well, you know what? I was doing so much. So back to the citizen science, about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, I was invited as a volunteer with Fish and Wildlife Service to fly to Midway, which is famous for the battle that took place in World War II that was known to change the tide of the war in our favor, the U.S.'s favor. But it's also famous for albatross.
Now, where's Midway?
Midway is about 900 miles, 900 to 1,000 miles from here.
And is that an island or an atoll?
It's an atoll,
okay.
And it's part of the Hawaiian island chain. And this is what I like to tell people. 28 million years ago, it used to be situated where Hawaii Island is today. But due to plate tectonics, these islands are moving at about 2.5 inches a year to the northwest. So over millions of years, it's subsided, so sunk into the sea, as well as, wind and water has eroded what mountains they used to have. Now their top elevation is about 30 feet, and it is truly an atoll. That is the mothership for lace and albatross. 75% of lace and albatross nest at Midway.
And how was it that you got to go there?
I was a volunteer. See, volunteering has its benefits.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Being a brilliant photographer, I'm sure helped.
Well, that came along with it. So, I was spending all this time among albatross. And then I came back and I started to monitor this colony that has just grown exponentially. And I have data books. We collect their band numbers because a lot of these albatross are banded when they're young. So we can ID them. It's just like with their personal social security number. And so over years, I recite them. I collect that data again for science. So we can do, just run different numbers and recognize birds, determine longevity. Through the use of this banding process is how we discovered that a lace and albatross at Midway, who's since been named Wisdom, is known as the oldest wild bird in the world. And she is 67 years old.
How did they figure that out?
She had one of these unique bands.
From 67 years ago.
She was banded as an adult, and when the bander banded her in 1956 or 57, she was an adult. So he estimated her to be 5 years of age. She could have been 10. She could have been 20 years old at the time. But they just put a minimum, being conservative. And he was back rebanding birds in 2008 or something, and was entering her data from the new band that he put on her, because sometimes they get old and faded, and so they'll put new ones on. And when he was putting the new band number in, he pulled up her old band number. He was like, whoa, this bird's old. And it was banded in 1956, and I banded her. So this same guy who originally banded her is the one who then rediscovered in 2008.
50 years later or whatever.
At that time, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's how we know. So that's, again, the importance of banding. And I do help with banding here on the island for our seabirds so that we can find these new discoveries. And so as of this past winter, Wisdom laid an egg, hatched a chick, and was raising it. So we know that at least, right, to 67 years of age, we have albatross that are producing chicks.
That's crazy.
It's astonishing. Yeah.
And there's no way to know if how many other eggs she's laid and hatched.
No, because at Midway, if you can imagine, just picture in your mind that every square yard, basically like every step you can take on this island that's maybe a mile by 2 miles, there's a lace and albatross nest.
How did you get there?
We flew in a very small and very old plane. It took about 5 hours.
So there's a landing strip.
There is, and it's still maintained. It was put in during the war, World War II, and it continues to be maintained because it's used as an emergency landing site for airplanes.
Because it's in the middle of nowhere.
Because it's in the middle of nowhere, hence its name.
Midway.
Yeah.
Was that the most remote place you've ever been? Like, there's no inhabitants there.
Well, there's a few scientists and people there maintaining the property that they have a couple dozen people there probably year round working. There's nearby atolls like Cure Atoll, which is 60 or 80 miles north. I've been there too as well. And they have a camp, a field camp that's there year round. But then between those two, those are the two northernmost atolls in the Hawaiian island chain. So between those two and then coming back south to Kauai, there's several other atolls. And I've been on those as well. And they are empty and devoid of people, except for during the summer when biologists are sent there for, like a field season. So yes, those are the most remote places probably in the world that I've been.
How long have you been doing this?
This, meaning?
Let's just call it the volunteer work.
10 or 12 years.
And how old are you? Do you mind saying?
55.
And the reason I ask is that I've heard people, I'm 52. What year is this? I think I'm 52. I hear people our age, because I think we're just about the same age, right? So I hear people our age. I get the sense from them that sometimes they feel like maybe not their life is over, but they're on the downhill. And I couldn't feel further from that. And I've never been one to feel like there's like milestone birthdays. I don't get that same angst or that feeling that a lot of people have, 29, 30, whatever. And for my 50th, I ran a marathon, my first marathon. And so so I look at you and I get absolutely no sense that you're wrapping things up. And if you have only been doing this maybe for 10 or 12 years, you said, I get the sense that you've just started. You are filled with information and you are, as you call it, the citizen scientist, and this isn't something, even though you had a background and you had a joy that you discovered early on in your life, you brought it together and with your intelligence and your skill at photography that can only be honed over years and years of developing this, of working at this, you've brought it all together. And it's a passion that I think I get the sense that's going to take you well into many years to come. And I just want to recognize that just for you and just give you kind of big kudos, but then also just to listeners, that there are so many opportunities out there for people to develop their joy and their passion and find an outlet for it that is serving others as well, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're serving not only an animal population, but you're serving other people as well by doing that, by just bringing that information to other people.
Well, I do share a lot of this information as a docent. So I work in education and outreach for, the refuges and different NOAA and humpback whales, so I get to talk about it a lot and then I get to write about it. So, and I would say too, the great thing, and back to endangered species capital of the world and 1/3 endangered species here in Hawaii, there's a lot of them. And so if you have a level of curiosity, and I think that's what's so important is for all of us to have is curiosity. And I think if we have curiosity in whatever it is, that gives us longevity and gives us something to look forward to and to continue doing. When I turned 50, I felt like I want to make sure that the next 50 are as good as the first 50.
What were so good about your first 50?
Well, like you, I did not ever use those milestones, 29, 39 as like, oh my God, I'm getting older. I didn't mind getting older because I felt like the older I got, the more I was learning and, the more, I guess, wisdom I was adding, I will say though, when I did turn 50, that was kind of like eye-opening for me. And, there's obviously physiological changes that are happening to all of us, whether we want them to or not. They just do. So I've had a few of those. But at the same time, I wanted to make sure that, wow, the clock is ticking. There is an end date. I don't know what it is, but there will be an end date. That's a fact of life, right? And I want to make sure that however many days or years that I have left, they're filled with something fun and interesting. And for me, you know how sometimes we say things when we're young and we look back years later and we're like, wow, that was good. I don't know where that came from, but man, you were kind of smart back then. And at one point I said something to an employer, I was probably in one of those 6-month review things. And I said something that, well, as long as I feel like I have room to grow, as long as I am having fun, and as long as I'm learning something, then I'm happy, right? And so I think in Hawaii, ironically enough, the endangered species, back to that again, right now I'm on to snails. So I'm learning right now. I just did a story about how the snails during our last hurricane scare, Hurricane Lane came through a couple of weeks ago, and it was a fairly substantial one in my nearly 20 years of living here. It's the one that pretty much the whole state slowed down and stopped, and, banks closed, schools closed, everything was, events and activities were canceled, and people were shopping for the, water bottles, which I have an issue with. Just fill up your bathtub. Because plastic is a problem in our oceans, and it's a big problem for all of our marine animals, albatross included. But we were all preparing, right? Plywood that's outside my house right now, that was preparing to put over the windows. And I was asked by a publication to write about how you prepare for a storm. And of course, I wanted to take a little different angle at it. So I looked at how our endangered species, how do we prepare for a storm? If you have an animal or a plant that is only found in this one island, and sometimes on the island in this only one valley, and is found nowhere else in the world, how do you protect it in the case of catastrophe? Well, sometimes you can't do a darn thing about it, and that's a fact of life. But sometimes you can. And so I got to write about it, and in writing, doing the reporting and the research for it, I discovered Hawaii's land snails. So there used to be hundreds, 700 or 800 different species, and maybe more, of native land snails. Tiny, some microscopic, some 4 inches in length, and colorful swirls of colors. They were considered the jewels of the forest because they were that beautiful. And sadly, we've lost a lot of them for a variety of different reasons. But this one group on Oahu they have a captive breeding program for snails, and they were moving all their snails from one place to another. And so anyway, I wrote about it. So there's always something new to learn, right? So I think that's what's so important in life, is that we're curious, right? And we find that thing that makes us curious, and we continue to explore it, and find something new to do.
The other day I went out for a run. I went for a 16-mile run or something, and I was based in Poipu, and I was kind of doing these out and backs around. There's a big roundabout down there. So I was doing these out and backs down there. And I came across a family of snails. I kept coming across a lot of snails, and I'm always really careful when I run. There were a couple that they didn't lose their lives to me, but I know other people stepped on them. But I stopped, and I actually took video of this one little family of snails crossing over the sidewalk. It was hilarious. But yeah, they're huge. These were big ones. I don't know, what is that, 4 or 5 inches?
Probably the African snail, and those, if you would have stomped on, you would have been cheered on.
Oh,
unfortunately, really? We have lots of invasive or introduced snails that are invasive, and those are carnivorous. I've had one take out a native plant that I had been growing in my backyard for years, and it's a very rare native plant. And a family of snails came in and just tunneled through it and toppled it within 2 nights. So those guys will eat other snails too. And the native ones. So those are some of the threats and the pressures that some of our endangered and native species here go through, is, these introduced, for whatever reason they were introduced. Either they hijacked in on a container ship of something, or sometimes 50, 60, 75 years ago, we were big into ag here, sugar, pineapple, and what have you. And sometimes these species would have been brought in to solve a problem that was happening on the plantation.
And then they just created another
one.
And
then they created another one.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then, you know, I travel through Australia quite a bit on my way to Papua New Guinea, and they are so strict.
Right.
You know, when you go into Australia, just they look at everything. If you've got any food, shell, meat, even packaged food.
Well, and that's why coming into Hawaii, you know, they make that announcement on the airplanes. If you have fruit or the uncooked plants that you're bringing in, you are asked to
and you get checked on the way
declare
out,
them. And then you get checked on the way out, too, which is kind of like counterintuitive.
That always confused me.
Yeah.
And these beautiful bananas that you've passed along to me, I'm like, okay, we got to eat bananas in the next few days.
You got to eat those, yes. Yes, because you won't be able to take them with you.
No, we won't.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm getting back to the age thing. I heard something recently that I live by, but I hadn't ever actually put into words. And I just thought it was so lovely that I want to share it. And it's that if you were given the chance to live forever, there's two ways that you can live. One is that you can put things off because there will always be a tomorrow to do it. The other is that you can embrace everything because there's so much to learn and you want to be able to do so much or master so many things. And that's what I've realized, that I don't know if I've always been like this, but it's certainly what I've become. And that is, and it's not an age thing like, oh my God, you know, I only have a limited time here, so I want to do all these things. But I do really feel that it's really important that no matter, because you don't know, you have a finite amount of time, maybe, you know, at least as of today, 2018, we have a finite amount of time. But there's technology's moving fast.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
Actually, the person who I heard say this is someone who said, I want to be the first immortal. So he wants to be the first.
Really?
Yeah. So he said, I want to master everything. I have all of these interests. I just want to keep living so I can keep learning. And I know that, you know, do you remember Interview with a Vampire? I remember when that book series was really popular. And I remember there were conversations and dialogues that people would say, gosh, you wouldn't want to live forever because you're going to outlive your friends and you know, life is going to get boring and all of this. But it just seems like we are getting better at living healthier for a longer period of time. If we're taking care of ourselves, we're able to take care of ourselves and we can have a healthier life. And then you can really be productive, you know, very late in life. And you can develop interests in photography. You can start things and do things much later in your life. And I just think that's so key. Yeah.
And, you know, and this just happened. I didn't plan this, but, you know, I'm a writer and I'm a photographer. And I feel like there's no retiring from that, especially as a writer. I mean, I think that is something that's just innate, right? And so I don't know how I'll be writing or what I'll be writing or for whom, or even if it is for anybody else, but I will be writing, you know.
Well, like you said, it's about having curiosity, and that is key. Even if a person wasn't writing, blogging, sharing, documenting, just being curious is such a key thing to enjoying life.
Right. So I think, you know, obviously having those kinds of interests that transcend time, if you will, or age, I think are good to have and maybe help people not feel like they're tied to some age and expectations.
I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before, but just another little thing that popped into my head was, I know I've talked to John about it before because it was this little epiphany that I had. I was reading a book, and from that book, and I don't even recall exactly what book it was, but it was reading a book recently, and then I said, "Oh, John, I'm reading this book, and it talked about blah blah blah," and then we got into this big long conversation, and I said, "You know, you don't do that when you're reading Facebook. You don't get into some big dialogue because of something you read on Facebook.
Right.
But reading is such a critical thing, and we've gotten so far away from that everything just seems so shallow. So when you talk about doing things that have longevity, you know, photography and writing and lots of other things too, reading, that there can just be so much more depth to it than getting sucked into your Instagram account, you know, which I mean, I'm on those social media accounts,
me
you know,
too.
but hopefully we can use those
But I also
to
have,
benefit.
My book club. You're just making me think of my book club. And it's,
Yeah.
a bunch of us, all women, and we're heading up to Kauai, staying in a cabin next weekend.
No kidding.
And we're going hiking, where there's hikes planned every day. There's yoga in the morning. There's healthy eating and book discussion. We're going to watch the documentary on Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Oh, neat.
So
is that just self-organized?
Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
great.
So, but reading, right? It's that love of reading. And that's what got me into writing to begin with was, being a voracious reader. And I remember getting those, I can thank my mom for this, those scholastic books that came, I guess, probably monthly, and I don't necessarily even remember any of them, but I remember loving when they'd arrive in the mail and wanting to open it up. And my brothers weren't quite as interested as I was, so I would just take them and, they would be mine. And yeah.
Do you think that your parents that they were very purposeful in that? Did they realize that what you would become when they did that?
No, I'm sure not. In fact, well, we had obviously the subscription. So obviously my parents understood the importance of reading, but I wouldn't say my parents were big readers. Not at my formative age, as they got older perhaps, but they were too busy, right? Raising 3 children and working. They didn't do much reading, but they encouraged it. And I think that, I was raised in a sense of practicality and realism. Because otherwise, I could be a dreamer and off, reading and floating and, should I go do this and travel this place and then go this place? And then I could be in the Peace Corps and then I'll volunteer for this. And then, how am I going to feed myself or pay for my mortgage or something? So I think I was born with some of these interests, and they were different than my family and immediate influencers. But what my family gave me was this sense of how I could be who I wanted to be in this world, right? So I would need to figure out, well, how can I make some money doing what I'm doing, because there are things as bills.
Mm-hmm. Were you off in the Peace Corps, or were you saying that was maybe a lofty idea, but you didn't?
Right.
You were really kind of being herded a little bit more practically speaking.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I was not in the Peace Corps. And, to give a more, I think as I've gotten older is where I've come into myself more, to where I was raised with this foundation of, how to survive in this world, right? In our society. And like when I was in college, when I graduated from college, I was the one of my college roommates who had the job 6 weeks before we graduated from college. The rest of my roommates grabbed a backpack, took off tramping around Europe for 6 months before coming back and then settling in and getting a job, right?
And then you got a job, but then you took off.
And then I took off.
Yeah, and then you came to live here.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. You had said when we were talking earlier that people have said to you that they find it inspiring that you picked up and moved here. But do you think that's is that a Midwest thing, that maybe because those folks did just settle down and they didn't make a big move? They kind of sowed their seeds and traveled when they were younger, but they could never imagine picking up and just taking off and leaving to such an quote unquote exotic destination.
Maybe it's a Midwest thing. I don't know, but certainly that was the experience. And yet some of them had done exactly that, like right out of college, right? So they had their 1 year, travel about, come back, get married, have children, buy the house, have the big career. For whatever reason, don't feel they can just pick up and move. I do think that there is a sense in our country that we don't consciously choose place. So earlier when we first started talking, I think the place is so important. The place draws people in. And I don't think that's unique to Hawaii. I certainly know people who are mountain people, water people, be that lakes or oceans. But in a bigger sense, I don't think we as a society think about place as far as where we want to live. So we think about, oh, well, we were born and raised here. We have family here. So that's our place, our home. And then we start having children or we get a job. And sometimes it's only the job that forces us to leave a place and go somewhere else. When my husband and I first moved here, and even to this day, when I'm volunteering at Kilauea Point National Wildlife Refuge, a lot of people, the visitors, want to know, how did you get here? How did you end up here? And so they want my story, right? And so I'll tell them my story and I'll say, well, my husband and I liked it. We came on our honeymoon. We bought timeshare. We kept coming back and we liked it. But that people don't seem to grok. They don't seem to understand. And they'll be like, so did you get transferred here? And I'll say, no. And then they'll say, did your husband get transferred here? And I'll say, no. And then they'll think some more and they'll go, do you have family here? And I'll say, no. And then they'll think some more and they'll be like, did the military bring you here? I mean, they cannot really understand this idea of choosing a place where we want to live, where we feel like we can be the best humans we can be.
Yeah, but don't you think that in the U.S., I think that in the U.S., almost more than many other places, and I guess maybe not Europe. I think Europeans move around quite a bit, but I just think, I'm just thinking, let's say in Asia, where you do not leave your community, you don't leave your family, and they look at Americans as you move away from your family, and you are so far apart. Now, having said that, I do understand that feeling or that idea of, like, because I will see it in family members where I think that they will be happier somewhere else where there's more opportunity, but they are rooted wherever it is they are, and they don't want to leave that community. I don't know. I think the people who are asking you that question, though, are ones that want to do it, but maybe I don't know if it's a woman, because I think women have a harder time uprooting themselves or being bold or thinking outside of the box and wanting to take that move or that step to do something. So they're looking for reasons, there's got to be something underneath that you're not telling me.
And I think something that's happening there too is, we have to have a reason for doing something. And if we do it because we like it or it's pleasurable, that is seen as selfish, instead of, well, my job brought me here, or, my family is here, so of course I'm here. But to pick up and move somewhere just because it is a place that makes you happy is seen as a retirement move, not as something you do when you're 35 or 36.
Or you do it when you're 22.
Right. You do your gap year thing and then you settle down and then you become responsible. So I feel like in a way I've kind of shifted that up. I was very responsible, from my 20s and half of my 30s, extremely responsible. I had a great paying job. I was probably more responsible then than I am now. So now I feel like at 35.
But responsible, but who's to define responsible?
Exactly.
Because I come here and I'm like, you're very responsible. Like, you're on a really interesting path in terms of what you're doing. And I see no irresponsibility in that at all. So I just think you're defining it in kind of a facetious way.
Well, or the way that, I feel like society is viewing me. Right. In that I have a house, absolutely, that my husband built us, and it's beautiful. I think it's not huge. I have friends who come visit and they're like, this is it. I'm like, yeah, because I don't like to clean.
Oh,
but they've got, they've been working the corporate job for decades and they have beautiful homes.
Yeah. And you have a beautiful home.
Well, thank you. It's modest. It's, small, but again, I don't like to clean. So I'd rather spend time traipsing down the beach looking for a monk seal, or watching a baby albatross hatch out of an egg, So to me, it's not where we put our priorities or what have you. But yeah, I judge myself. I'm always judging myself. I do that and compare am I doing the right thing or am I being responsible enough? But who's to say?
Mm-hmm. So you've got friends, maybe family that look at you and they say, you're bold, gutsy for having done this. And you're seeing people who don't even know you who are looking at you and also saying, like, how the heck do you do that?
Right.
And for you, it was just a natural. There was no real question about it.
Yeah, I think it was, very organic. Just one thing led to another. It was not a big grand plan.
Yeah, it wasn't a rash decision.
Wasn't rash. No, it wasn't rash. It took us many years to decide. And then we took a complete year preparing for the move and moving here. And then, just felt embraced and that this was at home and we were happy and making it work. And yeah, but again, we have friends back on the mainland who say, oh, you're never coming back again, are you? You're never going to leave Hawaii. And, I will say to them, I don't know. 6 months, 6 years, 60, I don't know. And, in this world, especially, I lived here through 2008 with the downturn of the economy, and it was very hard on the environment and economy here. And, so I don't know. I don't know where I'll be tomorrow, next year. But I do feel like that I do have, a certain number of good years to where I can make a difference and an impact and do good. And so I feel responsible to make sure that I make good use of those years.
And that number of years, though, could be 30, 40 years.
It could be, but there was something pre-50, and I think it's youth, right? That we think we're immortal. And I didn't think long term. I didn't think that there would ever be an end. So now I think I'm just more aware that there is and making good use of it, however much time it is, if it's 50 years or 5 years.
I have a almost opposite feeling of that. I have felt always that I have to hurry up and get a bunch of stuff done because I don't know how long I'm going to be here. And so I think it's only recently that I have felt like I can slow down a little bit. And I don't think it's slow down because I'm tired and I'm aging. As a matter of fact, I feel like I'm in the better health than I've ever been in my life, and I have more energy than I've ever had. So it's not that. It's more of just like, oh, maybe I can take time with this, and maybe I have more time here than I thought. Isn't that weird?
And then do you find yourself that you're feeling like slow down to enjoy it more?
Slow down to enjoy it more and to produce better quality.
Right.
So as an example, so I went to university for media communications. So radio, oddly enough, was my big thing.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I was going to be a DJ. Yep. So that's why I totally dig the podcast because I can just slip right into it. So I was going to be a DJ in New York until I learned that, you make like $6 an hour, and I needed to feed my travel habit. That wasn't going to do it, the $6 an hour. So I chose the travel stuff instead. But I also, during that time, I was doing a lot of photography, and especially with travel. So I had all this big fancy equipment and a big long lens, big 300 millimeter image stabilizer lens. It was super heavy. And then I just got tired of carrying that stuff around. So I sold it all. And then, of course, went to the iPhone. So all I've been doing for a long time is just using an iPhone. I just picked up a new camera. And so for the first time in 12 years, maybe, I actually have.
What'd you get?
I have a Sony R10.
Is that one of those mirrorless?
I think so. It's an all-in-one with a 24 to 600 lens.
Wow.
It's nice. Yeah, it's a nice.
And it's lighter weight?
I would say it is, I guess, lighter compared to what? Lighter compared to what I used to use. Right. It's very much so. But still, I pick it up and I'm like, man, this isn't my iPhone. It's like, it is on the heavy side. But yeah, it's a beautiful camera. Someone went on one of my tours had one, and so I got to see it in action, and I just thought, oh, this is just great. So I feel like that the one thing that appeals to me about it is that I can sit down, I can go for a walk, and I can be more observant. And so one of the things that I had had thought about for 2018 was just living more deeply and with more intention. And I just thought, this is the perfect, like having a camera, this appeals to me now because it forces me to slow down and really not just click, 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 click with the iPhone, but really I have to carry something that's a little bit heavier, and then I get out to enjoy nature. I'm going to the Galapagos in end of October, right? I'm leading a tour actually to Machu Picchu and the Galapagos in a few weeks. So I just felt like that'll give me the opportunity to slow down and be able to do that. So that's been a change for me over the years, is that at one time I thought, I just think, I think about those rock and roll tunes where they talk about dying young, right? That's what I felt like, that I have to do all this stuff because I don't know how long I'm going to be here. And now like, I've been around for a long time, and I think I'm going to be around for a lot longer, knock wood. And so I can just kind of take some time and, really kind of hone that. Yeah. Right. So it's a little bit different perspective on that.
Right.
I don't know that I'll be immortal, but I do want to be more mastery. I want to master things a little bit more and appreciate them more.
Well, photography, as you described it, I concur wholeheartedly. And I've heard the opposite from some people. They'll say, oh, you hide behind your camera and you really don't engage with the world, and I do think that can happen. But my experience with photography, especially if you've got, well, let's say you're doing bird photography and I'm sitting with a bird when I may be sitting with that bird for hours, or a monk seal for hours. And I am watching it maybe through a viewfinder, maybe not, but I'm observing it, waiting for it to turn its head a certain way to catch the eye catch is you get catch light in the eye, right? Or you get them making a certain expression, or,
you're waiting for the light, the sun to go down.
Right. And so there's so many things, and you can spend hours in one spot, right? And that's why
to be clear, I do not have that kind of patience.
Well, I don't always either, believe me.
Okay.
But I have had, many opportunities, right? So that helps. But I think photography is a great way to slow a person down, especially if you give yourself little assignments. And I think there's, great ways to do that with photography, whether it be an animal or whether it be
flowers,
plant life.
Yes,
or,
exactly.
Or inanimate things, but you're looking for patterns,
or a snail.
Or a snail. And then you get a macro lens and, you just get right in to where it becomes an abstract, the swirls of the shell, So, yeah, I think that photography is a great way to slow yourself down and enjoy things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I just got back from Papua New Guinea, and one of the things there is that in these big festivals, these big tribal festivals, and they're decorated in pigs' tusks and these amazing feathers coming out of their
I saw some of your photos. They're beautiful.
Oh my God. It was just fantastic. And now I find with my iPhone, they love to have their photos taken, but you have to get close up,
Right.
And that's, I just felt really rude being right on top of them to get close up. So I had to, I did in some cases with some of those, but others I just cropped them so that they were,
sure.
Closer up
sure.
images. But I just thought, what, if I had a longer lens, I'd be much better off, be much more comfortable with this. And I'm having more fun with the photography aspect of it.
Right.
So.
Oh, and I don't discriminate when it comes to cameras. I have an iPhone and I, use that iPhone for photography and rely on it.
Yeah.
There is a time and a place for everything.
Right.
And of course, the old saying is the best camera is the one you have with you.
Exactly.
So I'm a big believer in that because I always have my iPhone with me these days, right?
We all do. Yeah, absolutely. Boy, is there anything I feel like our conversation was really interesting.
Good.
And I also feel like I feel like if I was a listener, I'd be like, oh, this is really cool. Kind of hearing someone else who picked up and moved and who's got these interests that are so far beyond just my perspective. What you're into is so far beyond what I would be involved in. And I think it's really cool to listen to that.
And I would say I probably would have said the same thing about myself 20 years ago. I never would have imagined this. I never would have imagined this life that I'm living. And so it's like, me? You want to talk to me? I'm not doing anything special.
What's your best guess for 10 years from today?
Oh my gosh. See, I don't know. I really don't know. I think I want to, again, feel like I'm making use of my time and I'm contributing. And back to the 3 things that I came up with when I was 25, that I'm constantly, there's room for growth, whatever that might be. If it's, in an organization or in a career or a field, whatever it is that I'm giving my time to and that I'm learning and that I'm having fun, but I don't know. That's a fascinating question. But interestingly enough, 10 years will put me at 65, which is when many in our country consider retirement, right? So it's an apt question.
Well, what's interesting too is that think about 10 years ago, we would have never imagined the technology that's available today. So in 10 years, imagine what will be available and what we can do with it and what we will have learned in the next 10 years to do with it. And it's impossible to guess.
You're right. It's impossible to guess. I was watching a show on, I think, NPR or PBS last night, and it was about some of the technology that we're using today, be it like touch screens on our phones and on computers. And it had to do with like the predecessor to Siri, like for giving driving directions. And And this technology was debuted, a couple decades ago. And when it was debuted, it was thought as no way, that'll never happen. You could never imagine that we would talk into this electronic device and it would talk back to us and tell us, take the next left in 300 feet. And then stay in your left lane and you'll be, making your next left in a mile and 2/4. I mean,
we just watched a PBS documentary on the Voyager and the shuttle. And one of the guys says, I've heard something similar before. He said, we have more computing power in our pocket than the Voyager had. And what did he pull out of his pocket? A key fob to his car. Oh. Now, I wasn't expecting that.
Right.
I was expecting the phone. But he pulled out the key fob. So can you imagine? Because I do look at the world with amazement and like it's magical because I do believe it. And even though everybody has a love-hate relationship with their technology, right? I'm not unique in that, but I do look at my phone and just sometimes I just say, I just really love this. I love the ability, like what this can bring. And sometimes it is magic. It is absolute magic.
And yet it's the brainchild of humans, right? So oftentimes when I think about, and I'll go back to, I mentioned earlier, the plastic problem that we have in our oceans, and I can get really sad about it because I see lace and albatross chicks who die for whatever reason, and we do a necropsy, and basically a dissection, and open up their bellies, and we find bits of plastic in their bellies, and that plastic was fed to them by their parents because these are chicks who have not flown, have not left land. They have been land-based, and yet we're feeding them plastic. And the parents are getting it because of us, right? Humans, right? We invented plastic. We're the ones who are not disposing of it properly. And yet, so I can get really down about that. I can tell stories. I can make myself cry. But then at the same time, I remind myself of the ingenuity of the human brain, that if we could come up with the iPhone and we could create the key fob and the, Voyager, we will one day come up with, so I remind myself of just how amazing humans can be.
Have you seen a plastic ocean?
I don't know if I've seen that one. I've seen many. I've witnessed it myself. So
yes, you probably don't need to see it.
Watch it.
And I've mentioned it on the podcast.
Oh, I'm glad you have. Yes.
Yeah. So it's a documentary. If it's not on Netflix, I think it's on Amazon Prime, about what's happening in the oceans. I could only watch the first 20 minutes of it because right now, your description of that just made me sick to my stomach because it's the same thing. They're slicing open the guts of these dead animals and the plastic is spilling out. It is like I could taste it. I can taste the plastic in my mouth anytime I talk about this. It makes me so incredibly sad.
So thank you for coming with your refillable water bottle
Yes,
today.
I know. Actually, you know what? I want to give a shout out because we're staying at the Grand Hyatt in Poipu. And it's really interesting that these are now available in the rooms, these reusable plastic water bottles. They are plastic, but they're reusable bottles, and they've set up so they, instead of bottles of water in the room, they have these, and they've got water flow systems all over the place. Right. And to me, it's a brilliant economic thing for them because they don't have to put water bottles in every room anymore, and then they don't have to deal with the trash of it or the recycling or whatever. Hopefully they were recycling. But I just thought and it's a brilliant marketing thing because now look, we're talking about it.
Right. No, I'm all more than happy to give them a plug because of what they're doing.
But just can you imagine? It was who knows if it was an economic decision or one person got on the bandwagon and saw a plastic ocean or whatever and made them do the change. But just the money that they're saving is brilliant. The marketing, there's so much behind it that is just so wonderful. So I'm thrilled about that.
They've done several other environmentally friendly things on the island, and they tend to be the elite in the forefront of it. So their parking lot, has the PV, the photovoltaic system. They built that whole canopy. It's looks like a giant carport, right? But they did that in order to cut down on our use of fossil fuels here for electricity, because in the islands to get oil over here is super expensive. So we do have an initiative on Kauai and across the state actually to, I think, be 100% reliant, self-sufficient. So be that photovoltaic, solar energy, be that wind energy, whatever that form of energy, but to get off of fossil fuels. And I think the goal for the state of Hawaii is 100% sustainable by 2050. The year
So does that
2050.
mean no oil
There would
being
likely be,
imported?
correct, but there would likely be some, like for emergency situations, is what I would guess.
Well, I would think
Yeah.
fire engines, right? I would think that emergency vehicles would need it.
I'm talking electricity.
Okay. Got
Okay,
it.
so not for transportation
Okay.
yet, although I will say on Kauai, I see a lot of, so I was on the mainland this summer in the Midwest, and I rarely, if ever, saw like a Nissan Leaf. We have lots of Nissan Leafs here, and more manufacturers that are coming out with e-vehicles and it makes sense, right?
Right, it does.
I can't drive more than 100 miles on
They
this
do.
island.
I know exactly.
So-
And they do have plug-in stations at the high
And they're-
end for that. Yeah.
They do, right. And there's more and more that I'm seeing crop up. So, but thank you for the plug about stop our single-use plastics.
Absolutely. The other thing, too, that I'll mention just briefly is listeners will know, hopefully, unless you're a new listener, I just spoke to a woman named Beth Massa, who's a sustainable packaging entrepreneur. She's living in Amsterdam.
I already love her.
And she's opening up, or I think she just opened maybe in the last week or two, her store, Ozarka, and they have no single-use plastic containers in the store. And so they're working with manufacturers and producers of food to bring in sustainable food into the store, which is a really neat idea.
They're probably
into
doing things in
store.
bulk and things like that,
exactly.
where you bring in
Right,
your own
right.
containers and
Yeah. So it's all
living
good.
on an island, so many of those things just become crystal clear, right? We only have so much land. It's a finite amount of land, and we don't want to necessarily devote it all to landfills. And so reducing the amount of whatever that would go into a landfill is always smart. And a lot of plastic packaging is what doesn't get recycled and what goes into a landfill. So the more we can do that, the better. The more we can kind of reduce. I see this, at Costco every week. We've got visitors coming in and they buy cases of bottled water. And I want to put a little sign up at Costco. Please do not buy single use, buy the, water bottle and refill it. But then I will say too, our Kama'aina, our residents will do the same thing in a hurricane scare, but we're getting better because, now there's this thing called Aqua Bob, I think it is, that is a liner that you put in your bathtub and it's a one-time use. You fill it up, but it is
for
sterilized.
Emergency, yeah.
For emergencies. So for natural disasters, you fill it up, it's in your bathtub, and then you don't have to buy bottled water.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That is great.
And life straws, which are super popular, those should be in everybody's emergency kits. Those are my 2 emergency kits over there. We've had a busy summer. But so that, and yes, back to the plastic ocean, the time that I have spent in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, some of these remote sites where there are no humans living, and the entire coastline is littered in plastic of all sizes, be it plastic buoys, be it just bits of plastic. The strangest, most popular bit of plastic to wash ashore seems to be toothbrushes. And a more obvious one to me is the plastic soda bottle and water bottle caps. Those you see them, or then you start to see them break down. So one tip that I will give visitors, if they want to give back when they're here in Hawaii and contribute to some citizen science, our local organization of Surfrider on Kauai does weekly, if not twice weekly, beach cleanups. And they have lots of people. And this is it's hard to do citizen science if you're just visiting for a week or two to really get engaged. There are certain things that you can do, though, and this would be one of them, Surfrider beach cleanups, because Surfrider then, once, you collect it off the beach, then they put it into piles, they categorize it, they weigh it so that they can add, this is a contribution to science about marine debris. What kind is washing ashore here?
Where is it coming from?
Where is it coming from? You can oftentimes track it. And in the hopes of then, going back in some way and either reducing the amount of that plastic use or working with manufacturers or packagers on how to, hey, this is one that we're seeing all the time on the beach. How can we better package it?
I'm going to check into that and see if we can come up with something before we leave the island.
Yeah.
I mean, and join that, because if they have something going on, that would be neat.
They do. Usually one midweek, event and one on the weekends. So, and it moves around the island and you're on the beach.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah.
Sounds good. Anything else you want to touch upon? Got a good rounded conversation, I feel like. We'll either start moving here and helping you volunteer. They'll be inspired. Hopefully they'll be inspired to dig deep into what their passion is, and pursue it, because I think that's the real key here.
Right.
Is to pursue your passion. What I do at the end of all the podcasts, because this is the Be Bold podcast, I like to ask my guests, what does it mean to you to be bold?
I would say the boldest thing that I can do as a person is to be true to myself, be honest with myself, and in doing that, to try to live to my fullest potential. So I feel like so many of us hide our talents. So many of us hide our deepest desires and wishes. But if we can be true to ourselves and then act upon that, then I think the entire world would be better off, because we'll have happier people. We'll have more satisfied people that will have less anger, and then we'll raise happier children and just embrace who we are, so we can be the best possible humans we could be.
Beautiful. Great way to end. I'm going to ask you to hang with me for a few minutes, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you kind of a bonus question that I will allow supporters of the podcast to listen in a special venue. So hang tight with me. Thanks so much for having me here to your beautiful home, even though you're calling it modest and small because you don't like to clean. It is absolutely beautiful. The woodwork and the colors and the photography and everything. I'm just noticing it just is really lovely. And the view. You did a nice job.
Yeah, that was hard work out there, I'm telling you. Millions of years that I've been working on that mountain.
You did a great job on that. So thanks again, Kim. It was great to sit down and have a chat.
My pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed that and really appreciate, as much as I do, the fact that she didn't let anything deter her from picking up and starting a new life. As a result, it really seems like she's come into her own in her 50s. And I just think that is an awesome thing. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, here's a question from one of the Be Bold podcast listeners.
Hi, Beth. This is Lauren calling from San Diego. So my husband and I are taking a riverboat cruise down the Nile next year, and I know you're a fan of using natural remedies when possible, so I was wondering what you use for mosquito repellent and what else you bring with you to ensure good health on the road. Thank you. Bye.
Ooh, I love this question. Lauren knows I'm a big advocate for minimizing the toxins I put in and on my body, not to mention how this ultimately helps the environment. First, I want to say I'm a mosquito magnet. So if you ever want to make sure mosquitoes don't bother you, just travel with me. They'll all be on me. They'll all be bothering me. Seriously, I do several things in terms of mosquito repellent. First, I cover up with lightweight clothes to discourage the mosquitoes from getting to me in the first place. And what that means is I wear long sleeve safari type shirts and long pants. Now, I used to recommend wearing clothes impregnated with permethrin, but that has been shown to not be completely safe, not only for humans, but also to fish and cats. There was a study on animals that suggested it causes neurological, immune, and reproductive damage. Widespread studies have not been done on humans, so we don't know for sure, but I figure why risk it? Anyway, covering up is a great start, Lauren. In addition to that, I slather on oils such as lemongrass that will repel bugs. And I usually only have to put this on my feet and calves if they are exposed, my arms and my neck. Now, before I left for Papua New Guinea in August, John bought me a small spray bottle of Repel Lemon Eucalyptus Natural Insect Repellent. And I'll link to that in the show notes. It's DEET-free, and it worked really well. Now, that same company, Repel, has DEET version. So if you're looking for something natural, make sure you get the lemon eucalyptus version. In terms of staying in good health, that's the second part of Lauren's question in terms of staying in good health when I'm traveling and what I bring with me. I have to admit that I've become a bit fanatical about this. I take with me pretty much everything that I take at home in order to stay healthy. And that means all my usual vitamins and supplements, as well as some powders, including protein powder. But it also includes a powdered concoction that I keep in my pantry. And I make this myself by adding all my favorite superfoods, such as acai, turmeric, camu camu, spirulina. Gosh, there's probably another 10 things that are in there. And if you want my list, send me an email at beth@beboldpodcast.com. I'll share it with you. There's just too many things to list here. So when we travel, we generally don't have access to our usual foods. And for many people, a vacation means letting go and just not eating well at all. I figure if I can stay on my healthy supplements as much as possible, that'll prevent me from getting sick. I think it's worthwhile mentioning that I haven't had a cold in almost 10 years. I think it's my vigilance with eating well, exercising, and supplementing correctly. So if I continue that when I'm on the road, then I'm pretty assured not to be sick at my destination or when I get home. One other thing I do that helps prevent me from getting sick from all the germs in flight is to put a bit of lip balm under my nose. And that I do that as soon as I get on the flight. Now, I don't know if there has been anything that's scientifically proven that this works, but I believe it stops the germs from getting into my system. So call me crazy, but I haven't been sick in so long that I have to believe that this is helping. I also carry emergency packets, those little vitamin packets that come in different flavors. And I drink at least one of those a day, just to get an extra shot of vitamin C. Okay, I hope that answered your question well, Lauren. Thanks so much for leaving that message for me. If you have a question about travel, about a previous episode or guest, or about any other random stuff, just let me know. 877-280-5170. Thanks for hanging out with me for so long today. I appreciate it. If you've made it this far, don't forget to check out the show notes on the BeBoldPodcast.com website. I'll link to things that Kim and I talked about, as well as to suggestions that I made to Lauren. Now, those show notes also show up in whatever app you're using to listen, so you can find them there as well. You can find out more about me by visiting wanderlustandlipstick.com. Sign up for my newsletter. On the Wanderlust and Lipstick site, you'll receive a series of tips for making your travels safer. And as I mentioned earlier, this month I have a giveaway for a Cozy Up jacket from Prana. One winner will be chosen from subscribers to the newsletter, so make sure you're on board to get those details. For now, you can connect with me by friending me on Facebook, and I'm WanderGal on Instagram. If you'd like to travel with me, and why not, check out wandertours.com. That's WANDER, wandertours.com. Now, our Ireland tour sold out in about 2 weeks' time, but we've got space on our women-only tour to South India, as well as our co-ed trip to Papua New Guinea next year. Ladies, don't forget to join the Be Bold Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/BeBoldGroup. You're going to love the positivity, the encouragement, and support from that community. While you're online, go to the Be Bold Podcast Facebook page and give that a like. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Be Bold Podcast. And until next time, be bold.